Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of All Type Media Podcast. And today, I want to talk about Brendan Sorsby, Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, and the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation. I want to start by talking about the Cleveland media and how the Cleveland media has keep pushing this narrative about everybody but Shedeur. Everybody but Shedeur. When Shedeur was drafted, it was all about Kenny Pickett. The media was pushing for Kenny Pickett. Shedeur, the narrative was Shedeur messed up in his interviews. That was the narrative. And that's the reason that he was drafted in the 5th round. Shedeur Sanders was projected to be a 1st or 2nd round pick in last year's draft, and he fell off to the 5th round. And it has been something that the Cleveland media has kept using against him, and they have kept talking about all the baggages that Shedeur Sanders brings to the Cleveland Browns and all this exposure that the Cleveland Browns do not want. So then Kenny Pickett was gone. It was all about Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco was gone. It was all about Dillon Gabriel, the supercomputer. In this whole time that they had a quarterback competition last year, Shedeur Sanders did not get first team reps once. He was in another field throwing to ball boys, okay? Then Dillon Gabriel was concussed, and then Shedeur Sanders came in for the first time without even having any reps with the first teams in the game. Shedeur Sanders had an okay first 7 games. And I'm going to prove to you that he had actually more than an okay first 7 games. But then the season ended. The Cleveland media kept pushing for a quarterback to be drafted without giving Shedeur Sanders nor Dillon Gabriel, to be fair, a full season to show what they have. The offseason came before the draft, and it was all about, the narrative was all about Malik Willis and Kyler Murray. It was Malik Willis, we got to sign him. Kyler Murray, we have to sign him. Anybody but Shedeur. Deshaun Watson came back on the fold. And the Cleveland media has kept the narrative about how much exposure the Shedeur Sanders brings to the Browns, but you had Deshaun Watson on this team. And the draft came, and in the sixth round, the Browns selected Taylor Green. And now we should give Taylor Green a chance. Notice that is everybody but Shedeur. While Shedeur has embraced the Cleveland community, Shedeur has been in schools, has been helping the most needed people stay in Cleveland throughout the whole offseason, working, bought a house, has been working. When Todd Monken was hired as the coach, he was there to welcome him. He has worked really, really hard. And I understand that that's not all of it. But you are pushing away somebody who wants to be part of your community, who has embraced your community. And it seems like the Cleveland media and the Cleveland Browns in the past have not given quarterbacks enough time. Look at Baker Mayfield. They gave up on Baker Mayfield, and they signed Deshaun Watson. And what happened when they traded for Deshaun Watson? They gave him a guaranteed contract. They gave our picks away. And Deshaun Watson did not work out. Whereas Baker Mayfield went to Carolina, then went to Tampa, and became a top 10 quarterback in the league. We pushed Baker away, and now we are trying to do the same thing to Shedeur. We have to learn from our mistakes. We have to learn from history. And I truly believe that Shedeur Sanders must be given a chance. And I'm going to show you here why he should be given a chance. Let me look in here and let me share this with you all. And this right here is a quarterback comparison for the first 7 starts for Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who was the number 1 draft pick in the 2025, last year's, right, NFL season. Shedeur Sanders threw for 1,400 passes and Cam Ward for 1,298. This is the first 7 starts for each. The first 7 starts. Shedeur Sanders averaged 200 yards per game, whereas Cam Ward averaged 185.4 yards per game. So as you can see, in the passing game, Shedeur did better. Now in the completion percentage, it was very close, but Cam Ward did better with a 57.6 completion rate to Shedeur Sanders' 56.6. And the passer rating was also better for Cam Ward, 75.3 versus Shedeur's 68.1. Now Shedeur had more touchdowns, 7-3, but he also had more interceptions, 10-4. In which the touchdown to interception rate was 0.75 for Cam Ward to 0.70 to Shedeur. Shedeur had a 300 yards game in the first 7 games. Cam Ward didn't. And that 300-yard game was against Cam Ward. In the first 7 games, Cam Ward win-loss record for his team was 1-6. Shedeur Sanders was 3-4. The win percentage is 14.3% was for Cam Ward, and the win percentage for Shedeur Sanders was 42.9. This is the first 7 games, and this is why, to me, it's so important to give Shedeur more chances. And I'm going to show you why now, because now I'm going to compare Cam Ward's first 7 starts versus his last 9 starts. In the last 9 starts, he threw for 1,554 passing yards versus in the first 7, 1,298. Even though it was more yards, it was more games. So his yard per game was 172.6 versus the 185 that he had, 0.4 that he had in the first 7 games. But here's where Cam Ward starts taking over in the second half of the season. His completion rate went from 57.6 to 62%. His passer rating increased from 75.3 to 86.7. His touchdowns increased from 3 to 10. His interceptions dropped from 4 to 1. His touchdown to interception rate went from 0.75 to 10.0. He didn't have no 300-yard games. And his win and loss record went from 1 win, 6 losses to 2 wins, 7 losses. And his win percentage went from 14.3 to 18.2. As you can see, this is what happens with a rookie when you give him a full season. And that's something Shedeur didn't get. Remember, Cam Ward also had first team reps in the mandatory rookie minicamp, in the OTAs, in the mandatory camp, okay? In the preseason, in everything. Whereas Shedeur Sanders, first time he had reps with the first team was in the first game he was put in when Dylan Gabriel was concussed. But let's compare Shedeur Sanders versus the other top rookies in his class, right? In the first 7 games, passing yards, Shedeur had the most, 1,400. Then it was Tyler Sow with 1,341. Then Cam Ward with 1,298 and Jackson Dart with 1,152. Yards per game, again, Shedeur led those rookies. Completion rate, Shedeur was last place to Cam Ward, who was third, but first place was Tyler Sow. Passer rating, again, Shedeur was last. Tyler Sow was first. Passing touchdowns, though, Shedeur was second place, over Jackson Dart and Cam Ward, only behind Tyler Sow. But Shedeur also had the most interceptions. And he had the worst touchdown to interception ratio. And him and Tyler Sow were the only 2 rookies in the first 7 games to have 1 300-yard games. Shedeur was also second place in rushing yards, only to Jackson Dart. He was tied third with Cam Ward for rushing touchdowns. He had the most total yards in pass and rush with 1,569. He was second place for total touchdowns, pass and rush with 8. He was sacked the most with Cam Ward with 23 sacks. And he averaged with Cam Ward 3.29 sacks per game. Win and loss record, he was first place, tied with Tyler Sow, 3-4. Cam Ward was last place. Again, ranking. Pure production, he was first place. Efficiency rating, he was last place. Ball security, he was last place. Dual threat impact, he was third place. And most encouraging long-term profile, he was second place. What's the final conclusion? The national narrative suggested Shedeur Sanders struggled mightily as a rookie. But the numbers tell a more nuanced story. Through his first 7 starts, Shedeur led this group in passing yards, total offense, and was tied for the best win percentage 3-4. He also took the same number of sacks as Cam Ward while producing significantly more offense. The biggest knock on Shedeur is the interception, 10 touchdown to 7. 10 interception to 7 touchdown in start, which hurt his efficiency and touchdown interception ratio. However, his production, toughness behind a difficult offensive line, and an ability to generate offense put him ahead of the national narrative and firmly in the conversation with the top rookie quarterbacks. Now, please tell me if I'm crazy, but he was the only guy in this rookie, out of all these 4 rookies, that did not have any practice with the first team reps. Again, chemistry is so important. quarterback count is so important. So the cadence is so important. So it's very important for repetition. Now, the Cleveland media is pushing for the 2027 draft. I'm not opposed to it. But you have to give Shedeur a chance to see what we have on the guy that we have. But again, I mentioned earlier that it's everybody but Shedeur. Everybody but Shedeur. And now, Brendan Sorsby comes into the equation. Brendan Sorsby, who will be in the supplemental draft because he's ineligible to play for the NCAA because of gambling problems. So let's look at some of the Brendan Sorsby timeline, right? The saga. He bet at least 10,000 times over 4 years with more than 90,000 wagers, including 40 bets on his own team, Indiana in 2022. The Cleveland media is going to push, or has been pushing. Well, he was not on the active roster. His agent, let me repeat, his agent is pushing the narrative too. But what is the agent supposed to do? He's supposed to defend his client. And the entire investigation is not completed yet. You cannot vouch as the Cleveland media that he had not bet on games that he played or he was part of the active roster if we don't know yet, right? He went to rehab for a 35-day residential program for gambling addiction. Everybody but Shedeur. Now, if the Browns were to use a pick on the supplemental draft on Brendan Sorsby and gain the rights to Brendan Sorsby, last year, the narrative was that Shedeur Sanders brings too much of a light to Cleveland with all the questions and everything that comes with him, while having Deshaun Watson on the roster. The narrative was that it's not good for the team. But now you're okay with Brendan Sorsby bringing that type of attention. Again, everybody but Shedeur. So the NCAA, I apologize. Brendan Sorsby attorney won a temporary injunction to retain his college eligibility. Then the NCAA was enraged. The Big 12 filed a complaint. Georgia, Nebraska, and Michigan boycotted, canceled future matchup versus Texas Tech in protest of the court ruling. And with appeals looming and pressure mounting, Sorsby opted to bypass his final college season and apply for the NFL supplemental draft. So, the Cleveland media are pushing for this guy, saying how much potential he has, that he is better than Shedeur. Let's look at the college stats comparison between Shedeur and Brendan Sorsby. This includes all college games. It's not one season, it's the entire career. Total yards. Shedeur almost double Brendan Sorsby. Brendan Sorsby had 7,208 total yards. Shedeur Sanders had 14,032 yards. Yards per game, Brendan Sorsby averaged 205.9, where Shedeur Sanders averaged 275.1. The completion rate, we talk about Shedeur Sanders' completion rate in the NFL. Brendan Sorsby completion rate was 61.4, where Shedeur Sanders was 79.6. And this completion rates from college to NFL usually drop. So what are your expectations of Brendan Sorsby? The passer rating. Brendan Sorsby was 140.6, where Shedeur Sanders was 160.4. Touchdowns. Shedeur scored 134 touchdowns to Brendan Sorsby's 60. Interceptions. Brendan Sorsby had 18, Shedeur had 27. But the touchdown to interception rate went to Shedeur Sanders because Brendan Sorsby had 3.33 to 1, whereas Shedeur Sanders had 4.96 touchdowns to 1 interception. 300-yard games. Sorsby 6, Shedeur Sanders 19. Win and loss record. Brendan Sorsby 14 to 21 to Shedeur Sanders 36 and 15. And the win-loss percentage 40% for Brendan Sorsby, 70.5 to Shedeur Sanders in the same conference. In the same conference. But you might say, or the media might push, well, that's the entire career. How about the last season? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because in the final season, here is the stats. Shedeur Sanders had more completion than Sorsby had attempts. 353 completions for Shedeur Sanders, 336 attempts for Brendan Sorsby. Completion rate, 74% for Shedeur, 61.6 for Brendan Sorsby. Yards, 4,134 for Shedeur to 2,800 to Brendan Sorsby. Touchdowns, 37 for Shedeur, 27 for Brendan Sorsby. Interceptions, 10 for Shedeur, 5 for Brendan Sorsby. Interception rating, right? 168.2 for the ratings. 168.2 for Shedeur, 155.1 for Brendan Sorsby. Rushing yards, this is where Sorsby shined. 580 to Shedeur's minus 50. And rush touchdowns, 9 to 4. But overall, as you can see, Shedeur is the better quarterback. And now, let me show you some of the things that the Cleveland media has been pushing, talking about giving a second round pick. So let's go here and let's see. Let's go here and see. Well, before we get to that, well, let's go to the media. This is courtesy of the Fan Cleveland about taking Brendan Sorsby with the second round pick.
Sorsby in a heartbeat. Look, in a season where we are gearing up to potentially be starting Deshaun Watson, and think about all of the things that we have debated about him. Radio show hosts have decided to, try their best to become lawyers and defense attorneys and prosecutors over these last couple of years since we've traded for Deshaun Watson. When we're gearing up for that, it is very, very hard for me to care about somebody gambling on their team when they weren't even on the travel roster.
Again, courtesy 92.3 The Fan. The media's pushing now. Deshaun Watson, the lawyers, that the media had to become lawyers and attorneys. But you're saying it's okay to push for an athlete that bet on his own sport. Again, it's the double standards. Let me back it up a little bit so you can hear it.
Radio show hosts have decided to, try their best to become lawyers and defense attorneys and prosecutors over these last couple of years since we've traded for Deshaun Watson. When we're gearing up for that, it is very, very hard for me to care about somebody gambling on their team when they weren't even on the travel roster, when they weren't even able to be on the practice field, the 7th or 8th quarterback on the roster.
Now, they can forgive him. And I'm not saying I'm not comparing his situation to Deshaun Watson's. But when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, the narrative has been his interview process sucked. Everything that comes, all the attention that comes with Shedeur Sanders. When Shedeur Sanders has not done anything illegal or to compromise his status. But you okay with this? You okay with Brendan Sorsby being a part of the Cleveland Browns? Let's listen more.
All of that's fair. And I'm more in the middle when it comes to this discussion. I think if we're talking about the Browns going ahead and picking up Sorsby, I think it's all about risk. Because I think what I'm about to mention right here is a variable that no one is really mentioning. If you throw a second-round pick at Sorsby, you're going to have to invest time into that guy for more than 1 year. So if he's not good in the first year that you play him, like let's say that's this year, you're probably not going to draft a QB in 27 because you've invested a second-round pick in the Sorsby. So if he doesn't play well, you're not just throwing that second-round pick away. Like, you've got to invest time then in the Sorsby.
This guy start talking about second-round pick throwing a Sorsby. A second-round pick. I'm going to come back to that one.
Are you sure with such a stacked quarterback class that you are willing to invest so much time into Brandon Sorsby when you have the potential of missing out on really good quarterbacks at 27, on top of the fact that even you just said you don't even really think he's that much of a first-round prospect? Like, do we understand the risk that there is in throwing a second-round pick at this guy when we're on the cusps of a really good quarterback draft? Because at that point, because like I said, you have to invest so much time because you gave so big of an asset, you then are in a position where you probably have to pass up some of those guys at 26.
So you hear the Cleveland media. Again, this is courtesy of 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. They're talking about a second round. And a lot of the Cleveland media has been pushing that Brendan Sorsby is a first-round talent. But Shedeur Sanders is a fifth-round talent. Facts are facts. He was selected in the fifth round, but Shedeur Sanders was projected to be in the first round. Let's look at some mock drafts. And see where was Brendan Sorsby in these mock drafts. So this is a mock draft from April 30th. 2027 mock draft by Jordan Reed from ESPN. I see a lot of names here. One name I don't see is Brandon Sorsby. The quarterbacks that I see is number 1, Arch Manning to the Cardinals. The third pick to the Jets, Dante Moore. The fourth pick to the Browns, CJ Carr. Let me see who else. Number 14, Drew Mestmaker to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let me see anybody else. Any other quarterbacks in the first round? I don't see any other quarterback. Where was Brendan Sorsby in this mock draft? Not listed, not projected, not a first-round pick. Answer. Brendan Sorsby was not projected to be a first-round pick in Jordan Reed's April 30th, 2026 draft. But, hey, that was only one draft, right? Let's go to Fox Sports. May 13th by Rob Ranks. Again, a name that I don't see here is Brendan Sorsby. We have Arch Manning, number 1 to the Dolphins. Dante Moore, number 2 to the Cardinals. Sam Levitt, number 4 to the Browns. Let me see who else. Julian Sain, number 12 to the Jets. Lenoris Sellers, number 14 to the Steelers. Anybody else? And that's it. 5 quarterbacks going in the first round, and it was not Brendan Sorsby. Well, let's look again. May 20th, CBS Sports by Chris Hummer. His mock draft. Again, Arch Manning, number 1 to the Jets. Who else? 1 to the Jets. Dante Moore, 13 to the Steelers. Anybody else? Any other quarterbacks here? Only 2 quarterbacks. Brendan Sorsby was not there. Now let's look at June 1st. I'm going from April 30th to June 1st. A whole month. And this was Pro Football Network, Alec Elijah's mock draft, the first round. And the first quarterback off the board is Arch Manning, number 3 to the New York Jets. Then after that is Dante Moore, 13 to the Vikings. 14, Darian Mensah to the Steelers. Anybody else? 3 quarterbacks gone in the first round. Where was Brendan Sorsby? I don't see him. So I said to myself, well, let me look at the draft boards. Let me look at PFF draft board, right? The top 50 draft board by PFF. Where was Brendan Sorsby? He was number 40th. How many quarterbacks before him? Julian Sain, number 2. Dante Moore, number 3. Arch Manning, number 6. Let me see who else. Drew Messmaker, number 29. Okay? And CJ Carr, number 38. Brendan Sorsby is number 40. Okay? So, again, all this media pushing the narrative that Brendan Sorsby is projected to be better than Shedeur. I'm kind of iffy. So let's start looking at some of these. Okay, people talk about the contradictions between Todd Monken and Andrew Berry. Let's listen to that again. Let's listen to Todd Monken's reaction when he was asked, right, about a potentially drafting Brendan Sorsby on the NFL supplemental draft.
Browns are going to have to make a decision on whether to participate in the supplemental draft for Sorsby, Brendan Sorsby. My question to you is, have you been kept up to date on the organization's research of that player?
Not at all. I mean, that's not even come across my desk. I don't think we're in a position to want to go down that road. That's my opinion. That's not Andrew's. And that I like the quarterbacks that we have. I think that's a slippery slope when you go down that, irrespective of talent, right? In terms of the situation he's put himself in. Like we all know what that is. He put himself in that situation. And we've seen in other sports with players that have been banned for life from playing in professional sports. I think that's a slippery slope to go down that road. Again, that's a question for Andrew and for management. But from my end of it, kind of a tough angle to go down that road and think that that's going to be your franchise quarterback if he's ever eligible to even play in the NFL.
So you hear Todd Monken, and again, Todd Monken is being very respectful of Andrew Berry and his position, saying this is his opinion and not Andrew Berry's. So Todd Monken understands that Andrew Berry might put a bid for Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft. If you ask me, if the Browns should put a pick for him, I will say no. But if they put a 6th or 7th rounder, I will not be upset. That's a project. That's a project. And if you give Shedeur the opportunity to be your starting quarterback this season, and he shows you that he's a franchise quarterback, because that no time have I said that Shedeur Sanders is a franchise quarterback. He has the potential. And we have to give him a full season like Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, and all the other quarterbacks had to improve. Now, if they bid a 6th or 7th rounder on Brendan Sorsby and get him, he might be a backup for Shedeur, or he might be a backup for whoever the Browns select in the 2027 draft. But instead of looking towards the 2027 draft, why don't we say, what if Shedeur becomes our franchise quarterback? What if? We might have a chance at Jeremiah Smith then. Now, have we thought about that? I mean, the chance of drafting Jeremiah Smith and having a wide receiver room of Jeremiah Smith, Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, and Isaiah Bond. Has that even processed? No, because all we talk about is the negative. All we talk about is the quarterback we wish we have, without even knowing if we have him on our roster or not. Now, we heard Todd Monken talk about he wouldn't want Brendan Sorsby, but at the end of the day, it's up to Andrew Berry. But with your coach, your brand new coach, let me say that again, going public saying he wouldn't want Brendan Sorsby, why will Andrew Berry place a bid on him? I mean, he could. Again, maybe a 6, maybe a 7. But we have to see, hey, is he getting Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft low because he might be trading Dylan Gabriel? Because Deshaun Watson might not be here after that? I mean, we have to look at every angle, right? Now, let's listen to what Andrew Berry had to say, courtesy of 92.3 The Fan.
Two things. I think there are two questions I ask because we're all human, and I'd imagine everybody that's on this call and listening to this show, I'm sure everyone has made mistakes. I think I really asked two questions. I asked, number one, is this a bad person or did they make a bad decision? And then the second piece is like, okay, what are they doing after the fact, whether it's to correct the behavior? Like, is this like is this a pattern of decision making? And if so, have they done something to stop the pattern, or is this an isolated incident? Because the reality of it is, like, we're all going to screw up, and some certainly mistakes are greater in magnitude than others. But I think, the most important thing, in Brendan's case is like what he does from here. Obviously, it's a great first step, to get the help that he needs. But then it's like, okay, what is around him? What is he doing to make sure that he can maintain healthy habits moving forward? And so it seems like it's a very good start there.
Now, the Cleveland media has been pushing the narrative of, well, Todd Monken could have said that just because the Browns may want to show no interest on Brendan Sorsby so they can get him. But I look at it as the opposite. Andrew Berry might be speaking highly of him so somebody else can place a higher bid on him. The same way he did with Travis Hunter. The same way he did with Carnell Tate. I have seen Andrew Berry speak highly of players, so people think he might draft them, and that's not who he's looking at. So we gotta hold our horses here, and we have to let it play out. And if Andrew Berry thinks getting Brendan Sorsby is what's best for the team, well, he's the man in charge. But I think that Andrew Berry has proven, even since last year, that he believes in Shedeur. Or do we not remember that when Shedeur started playing, even before that, Kevin Stefanski wouldn't even mention his name? Whereas images and videos came of Andrew Berry hugging Shedeur and embracing him. And I know you heard the great interview Garrett Bush had with Deion Sanders, and Deion Sanders speaking so highly of Andrew Berry, right? And talking about how grateful he is for the opportunity and to the Haslams. So let's listen to some more, because this gets even better. Let's listen to some more. I have a lot here today. Let's listen to Emery Hunt on Shedeur Sanders, right? And let's see what he had to say.
How disingenuous many people are, and how they're looking at this Shedeur thing with disingenuous eyes. If Shedeur was drafted in the first round, they talk about his 3-4 finish with the opportunity to go 5-2 to be like, wow, look at what he had. He barely had this and that, and they won 3 games. They should have won 5. But because he went in round 5, they're saying now, well, he threw 7 touchdowns and 10 picks. They lose all context, and they'll bring up QBR and all that stuff like that, as if QBR matters when we watch Dylan Gabriel perform worse than Shedeur with better numbers. So that tells you how much QBR doesn't matter. But I'm saying all that to say this. With Shedeur out there, you have an ascending talent. You have a guy that played good football, solid football with, considering the situation. And now you have better offensive weaponry around him. He has a stable offseason. And for Deshaun Watson, I just want to see him get back to that fluid throwing motion that we used to see from him in Houston. I said this was maybe the 2023 season or 2024 season when they played the Cowboys, and it was evident in that game he couldn't push the ball deep down the field. And it was frustrating because when you watched him in Houston, he legit threw the football like Warren Moon. It was a smooth stroke. He could throw it deep down the field accurately. And until I see him rip it like that again, then I would know for sure he's fully back. And it's unfortunate we're talking about something that happened in 2020 because we're 6 years removed from that. And he acknowledged the fact that he's not the same player. So we don't know what this version of Deshaun Watson looked like. But I do feel like at worst he gives you a solid veteran backup right now. But Shedeur Sanders is the ascending talent, and you want to maximize that with how well he finished last year, juxtaposed to what you built around it.
Now, you hear what Emery Hunt had to say. How it would look at Shedeur different if he was picked in the first round. Which, again, he was projected to be in the first round or in the second round. But since he was picked in the 5th round, everybody wants to use it against him. And we all know that Shedeur Sanders was drafted in the 5th round. That is true. There's evidence he was drafted in the 5th round. But everybody also knows this was a special situation, was special case, an isolated case, because Shedeur has a 1st round or 2nd round talent. So why do we want to invest time and first team reps on everybody but Shedeur? Last year, when Shedeur was not getting any first team reps, I didn't hear many people from the media coming on his defense when Dylan Gabriel was getting all the first team reps. But now this year, since Dylan's not getting the first team reps, I'm hearing the Cleveland media talking about they feel sorry for Dylan Gabriel. Huh? Please make that make sense to me. You feel sorry for Dylan Gabriel now, but you didn't feel sorry for Shedeur Sanders. You were cheering for him to stay on the other field. But one thing about Shedeur is that he doesn't let any of this bother him or get to him. He's going to keep working harder. So those are traits you cannot buy. So let's listen now to this supplemental draft, right? Let's listen to Phil Yates, right, on the rules of the supplemental draft and why it probably won't make sense for the Browns to put in a first, second round, maybe even a third round for Brendan Sorsby on the supplemental draft.
Go back and remind ourselves the rules of the supplemental NFL draft, right? We haven't had a player picked since 2019. That was Jalen Thompson in the 5th round. But, just for fans that are listeners that haven't gone back and meticulously studied what it means, you're anteing up a pick. You are, that's bad word there, obviously. You are making a pick. You are offering up a pick here, and you are doing so. It's only your own pick. Right. So if you are the Jets, a team that people think could be in on the Sorsby mix, you have your first round pick next year. You have 2 others as well. If you're going to offer up your first round pick for Brendan Sorsby, it is going to be wherever your pick falls. Right. So if you're the Jets, you can't say, hey, we'll offer up the Packers/Cowboys pick. Or the Colts pick. It's your pick. So it's understanding what you think your team is going to be this year. It is understanding how the league might value the player, because you're not aware of whether, if you're the Jets, you don't know if the Browns, the Cowboys, the Rams, the Dolphins, whoever is also interested in Brendan Sorsby. So it's a very unique exercise that rears itself maybe twice a decade. So it's and this is the most notable one, I would argue, pretty clearly since Terrell Pryor came out in 2011 after his Ohio State career came to an abrupt end.
Yeah, and kind of bringing up the Browns in that, obviously the Browns have 2 first-round picks now. They have the Rams pick. So, Field, you're saying if the Browns were to bid a first-round pick, which I don't think would be likely, but they couldn't say, hey, we're going to bid the Rams first-round pick. It would have to be the Browns pick.
It would be the Browns pick. So they're sitting there saying to themselves, all right, if the internal calculus, you just traded away Myles Garrett. I don't think the Browns are saying to themselves, like, tenants, I'm sure they would say it publicly, but I think privately, if you gave them some truth serum, they understand this is a rebuilding year. Are you really willing to use a first-round pick on Brendan Sorsby that could be 5th overall next year?
So the most important thing or most impactful thing of this supplemental draft is that even though the Browns have multiple picks in the first round, for example, they have their own and the Rams pick because of the Myles Garrett trade, that they had to bid their own. And the Browns are projected to be a team on the top of the draft. So why will you invest your draft pick on Brendan Sorsby when, if you still need a quarterback and Shedeur doesn't play out, you can have a Dante Moore, Arch Manning, a guy who's been going very quietly, a Julian Sain. So we have to start looking at these things with reality. And I'm not here knocking on Brendan Sorsby. I am not saying that Brendan Sorsby should not be drafted. I think there's a lot of investigation that needs to keep happening. And if Brendan Sorsby was gambling when he was not on the active roster, what tells me he won't gamble if he's redshirted this first year? Because of a suspension that he might have to face, or because he couldn't have any reps during training camp. So these are things we have to start looking at. So why would we invest, or why would the Browns invest a first, second, or third round pick, which is their own, on Brendan Sorsby? I think Brendan Sorsby's best case scenario would be going somewhere like the Eagles, that they have a quarterback. You know, if he would have came out this year, maybe the Rams would have taken him instead of Ty Simpson, right? And he can learn. He needs veteran leadership. The Browns are a young team. I don't think that's a good situation for Brendan Sorsby. We're talking about somebody who has an addiction. And gambling addiction is not something that's going to go away with a 35-day program, especially when you can check all that Brendan Sorsby is doing, but it seems that he doesn't have the support at home that he needs, because he was gambling through his brother-in-law. That tells you that he knew he was wrong. That tells you he knew he was wrong. But that also tells you that his family is supporting that addiction. So how do we know that he won't do this again? I think that he needs a veteran leadership to support him. A first-class organization such as the Eagles, the Rams, the Chiefs, a team like that. Even the Seahawks. A team that could mentor him and help him. Because we want this young man to stop his addiction. Adam the Bull was talking about he's a gambling addict on the UCSS show. And he talked about he hasn't gambled for about 16 years, but he's still an addict. He's an addict in recovery. So this is something that Brendan Sorsby has to deal with. Now, Brendan Sorsby has potential, but let's look at what happened with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson came from Houston, being a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the NFL. But because of the suspensions, then the injuries, plus all the media attention and the fans' responses, Deshaun Watson was never the same. How do we know Brendan Sorsby is going to be the same if he faces a suspension? If the crowd starts booing him? If he comes back from suspension, gets injured? How do we know he's going to be the same? Again, I'm going to go back to my earlier statement. We have to learn from history. Browns, we have to learn from history. We made the same mistake with Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield that we probably will be making if we listen to this media, to the media narrative. We might make the same mistake with Shedeur Sanders and Brendan Sorsby. The only difference being, well, there's 2 differences. The first difference is that what Deshaun Watson was accused of, allegedly, is worse than gambling. But the other difference is that Brendan Sorsby has never even been half of the quarterback Deshaun Watson was before he came to Cleveland. And that is a true statement. All right, let's look at the next video, the next footage. Now this is Phil Yates on Brendan Sorsby as a round 2 pick. Let's listen.
So I've talked to a bunch of people around the NFL, and I would say the highest grade that I've heard for Sorsby has been a second round pick. I've had other people tell me no way I would touch him until late day 3, 5th round.
Okay.
But we just don't know, right? So I'd say that typically where I end up when you're surveying people is like somewhere in the middle, right? So I thought initially probably a second round pick. I think as of the time that you and I are having this conversation, I would lean more towards the 3rd round for Sorsby in the supplemental NFL draft. But it just takes one, right? And people gauging, unlike the actual NFL draft, you're competing against 31 other teams, but you're also stacking a board of hundreds of players, right? So when you're saying, this guy's probably a second rounder, it's relative to all the other players that are available that year. Now, the strategy is a little bit different. Yes, a second round pick is a second round pick is a second round pick. But if you like the player enough, even if you say to yourself, maybe we'd prefer to have him in the 3rd round off of talent, we know that if one other team beats us, then we're toast. So it's very unique. It's a very unique process.
This video is courtesy of the Daily Grocery from ESPN Cleveland. Thank you, Chops, and thank you, Phil Yates. Now, when you hear Phil Yates, he says the highest rating he has heard on Brendan Sorsby is a 2nd round. And the lowest is a 5th and 6th round. So it's maybe somewhere in between. So I'm going to go back to my original statement. Why are we having this discussion between Brendan Sorsby and Shedeur Sanders when Shedeur Sanders' ratings was a 1st or 2nd rounder? Legit. Whereas Brendan Sorsby is a 2nd to 5th or 6th rounder. Let's listen to some more. Let's listen to some more here because this is too good to be true, right? All right. Now let's listen. Mike Renner, right? Again, courtesy of the Fan, 92.3 The Fan, on whether Brendan Sorsby is worth a pick by the Browns or not.
Is Brendan Sorsby worth the headache?
I don't think he is. I mean, I think that's why he came back in the first place. Was that, this guy spent 4 years in college football already, 3 years as a starter, and didn't come out in a relatively weak quarterback class. I think that tells you a lot about what the NFL thought of him. And so he needed the one more year of seasoning, so to speak, to improve his draft stock into realistic sort of territory. And then you add the fact that he's a former gambling addict, obviously, in recovery right now. No telling what that will do to his future prospects. I don't know if anyone takes the risk with the day 1 or day 2 pick, especially considering what this next draft class could be like that you're robbing a pick from, and even what this next quarterback class could be like.
So you hear here that he's not worth the headache for the Browns. He's not worth the headache. But the Cleveland media has to keep pushing it. And now we're going to see, after Mike Renner said that, what's the next question that comes? Let's check it out. And so you can see I'm not making this up. This is exactly what I'm talking about, the narrative from the Cleveland media. So let's listen to see what's the pushback from the media.
Team like the Browns, though, Mike, and you've got all of these draft picks now because you've traded back a bunch and then you traded Myles Garrett away. Could it be worth it for somebody like Andrew Berry, who's so desperate to finally solve this ongoing quarterback crisis?
I mean, he's one of the it's one of the spots that makes more sense. But even now, it's like you add him to that room, you're cutting a young guy. There's no sort of lock that he makes the team, given how late to the game he is. If it is a day 3 pick, that you're using on him, considering that similar capital to Dylan Gabriel used a year ago, similar capital to Shedeur Sanders. So, like I said, it's one of the spots that makes sense, but I just would be very surprised. I would just have my sights set a little bit higher on next year's quarterback class if I'm Andrew Berry.
Is there any way you could do both, though, where you take Sorsby and then you also, I mean, if it's a 4th or 5th round pick, whatever that is, you'd still have a stab at the 27 draft class, would you not?
You see how they keep pushing for Brendan Sorsby. They keep pushing for Brendan Sorsby. Anybody but Shedeur Sanders.
You would, and gosh, what was it? When the Cowboys drafted Troy Aikman, the very next, that summer, they used a supplemental first rounder. I can't remember who the quarterback was. It's happened before, and that was Jimmy Johnson that did that. So it's not as if bad decision makers have done that. And again, when you don't have the quarterback, it behooves you to take as many shots as humanly possible. But I just think that, when you do draft, especially the quarterback position in the supplemental draft, their off season is a month. It's the shortest off season ever. There's no getting up to speed. So it's basically a redshirt year anyways. And you just have a lot of guys right now that you're trying to evaluate. To put a 4th guy in that mix, like I said, you have to roster him at that point. And I don't know if you'd feel comfortable doing that given just how green he'd be.
So you heard Mike Renner kept telling them why it's not a good it's not a good decision for the Browns to place a bid on Brendan Sorsby, but the media keep pushing towards it. And Mike Renner kept telling them. We heard Phil Yates talk about on ESPN Cleveland that Brendan Sorsby is rated as a 2nd to 5th or 6th round, from a 2nd to 6th round pick, right? Let's listen to Mike Renner. And Phil Yates said that. Now let's listen to Mike Renner and see where he had Brandon Sorsby if he would have came out this past year in the 2026 NFL draft.
You grind a lot of tape and you watch a lot of these quarterbacks. Just from a football perspective alone, what do you see out of Sorsby? I keep getting all these different comps of bigger Baker Mayfield is one that keeps popping up. We've had a couple others that just continue to pop up in the same way. What do you see when you watch Sorsby?
I think he's incredibly physically gifted. I see a guy with really natural arm talent. He's a very rotational thrower, and so he can really put some zip on it with his lower half. And I thought he improved a lot last year, but there's still some glaring weaknesses, I'd say. I mean, there's some games that really stick out as worrisome. Arizona game, the Nebraska game week 1, where the ball's just all over the place, a lot of bad decisions. I mean, I think those 2 games in particular are why he did have to come back to school. And, in the Big 12, playing quarterback, it ain't like playing quarterback in the SEC or Big 10. Those defenses aren't the same caliber of talent. It's really only Texas Tech that had a real defense in that conference last year. So I do think that he was, to me, if he would have come out last year, he was a day 3 pick. He was like a 5th, 6th rounder. That's where his projection was. Despite, again, being very physically gifted, having a really gifted arm, being a good athlete with good size. But we'll see. I do just worry about those very rotational guys. Caleb Williams is one of them. It's hard to fix accuracy issues with those guys because it's such a violent motion when you really have to use that much lower half to get zip that a lot of times those guys just tend to spray, and I worry about that accuracy issues ever really getting fixed. So that was my kind of take on Sorsby before, he ultimately returned to Texas Tech.
So you hear Mike Renner talking about he was projected to be a 5th or 6th round pick if he would have came out this year. Well, Shedeur Sanders was a 5th round draft pick. I remember with Taylor Green was drafted last month in the 6th round, and people talk about all this potential he has, all this potential. Brendan Sorsby could be a 5th or 6th round. And all this potential. Again, everybody but Shedeur. When you have the guy in your building, in your city, trying to be that guy for you. The guy moved to Cleveland. He's part of your community. And you're not willing to give him a chance? I don't know. Let's listen to the Debo and Joe podcast to see what they had to say about the situation.
The whole reason that the GM Barry is looking like, oh, you know what? It's a possibility. We want the gambler, the quarterback, and let him get into the supplemental draft. And you know what? That's crazy as hell, dude.
Crazy.
Because, general feeling is that NFL execs is saying, they believe that the NFL is going to approve him into the supplemental draft. That's crazy to me, dude. But anyway, dude, we're talking Browns. You're talking about two quarterbacks, and you're saying money, not money. It's not money. I think it came down to, all right, maybe we could try and get some money. But for him to now being true, all right, he has elevated himself to where he can't even make a decision, where before they saying that Watson had the lead on it, and you have basically not separated yourself. I feel like it's going to be Shedeur. I feel like they go ahead and give Shedeur that chance, because if you don't, and you put yourself in a position where he comes out there and say he does enough, Shedeur could do enough.
Yeah.
To go ahead and win if everything else, if the special teams hold up and the defense holds up. So why would you go and put yourself in a position where now you don't know how much advancement Shedeur could have did if you had just gave him that, versus now having him and then he's gone. You can't pay him. You're not going to pay him. So why even put yourself in a position?
Now you hear Debo and Joe talking about why Shedeur should be the starter this season. I'm going to go back. Ever since Shedeur has been with the Browns, which has been about a year and a month, about 13 months, the Cleveland media has pushed for Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, Deshaun Watson, Malik Willis, Kyler Murray, Taylor Green, and Brandon Sorsby. 8 guys. 8. But we're not willing to give Shedeur a full season. A full season to show what he has. Now, I'm going to play this final clip here. It's a final clip from the Debo and Joe podcast, courtesy of the Debo and Joe podcast. And Joe Hayden's going to be talking about why he feels that Shedeur Sanders should be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns in this upcoming season, and where he had him rated last year before the NFL draft. Let's listen.
So I'm with you 1,000%. I want to start Shedeur Sanders. I think we should give him the keys. I think that if we started him right now, we're going to at least know. I believe that he should have been a first-round pick. I believe he should have been a second overall pick. After, if you want to Cam Ward, then go Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion. Let him get – there was no competition between him and Dylan Gabriel. It was just because he was a fifth-round pick. He's obviously better. He's better, okay? So now, once he's starting, he has a coach that's rocking with him. He has receivers. I'm saying the same thing you're saying, Debo. It's just the Deshaun Watson. I want him to keep do what you got to do, Deshaun. Keep working. I hope that you succeed because, coming off the injuries. But for me, for the Cleveland Browns, that ship has sailed. You know what I'm saying? I hope you can be able to get somewhere and you're going to be solid. But Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback right now for the Cleveland Browns. We've always been looking for a franchise quarterback. Right now, we have, I believe, a quarterback that can get it done. Let's give him a fair shot and an opportunity where he's doing everything right now. He's building. He's listening to the coaches. He's coming in there. He's not saying nothing. And I think from his rookie season, he had things that he needed to improve on. That wasn't one of the best years. But if you know what you got to improve on, that's your rookie season. Like the rookie season is the hardest year, and especially if you're at a quarterback and now you got a coach that's rocking with you. You have capable receivers, running back, a competent team. If Shedeur's not the guy, we'll know after this year. We'll know for sure after this year. Then we can figure something out. Because we know Deshaun isn't going to be the guy. We're not going to pay him. We already gave him $230. It is what it is. I hope everything works out. We have Shedeur on the team right now. Let's see what's going on. You drafted these guys. Let's see if this is the guy. Because if he's not, then you guys can move on. But I believe, give him a man a chance. You've been trying, quarterback. And then you're talking about a supplemental and trying to get this dude that the gambling problems and all of that. Shedeur was having some off-field bad interviews. His numbers are way better than this dude. So we already got this dude on our team, and you trying to give up some future picks for another. No, let's see what this guy can do. If it doesn't work, we'll be right where we were before. But at least we'll know we gave out our shot with the quarterback that we have on our roster.
Now, you just heard Joe talking about that he felt that Shedeur should have been the second pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. The second pick, right after Cam Ward. We also heard him talk about, you got to give him a full season. And I truly believe he needs a full season still. Even though he played 7 games last year, now you had a break in between. You have the offseason. You have a brand new team, brand new O-line, brand new wide receiver room. He needs this time to play with this new offensive line, new wide receiver room to create chemistry. And then you'll see in the second, you should see in the second half of the season if Shedeur Sanders is your guy or not. But I hear a lot about should let Deshaun start playing and let Shedeur come in the second half of the season. You basically putting him in the same spot to fail because you're not giving him enough games to prove that he has improved. Because if you wait till after 7 or 8 games, it will be a full calendar year before Shedeur Sanders gets back on that field. Let's think about that. Another name that I forgot to mention in the everybody but Shedeur sweep takes is Ty Simpson. Oh yes, the Cleveland media was pushing hard for Ty Simpson to get drafted by the Browns. How's the Cleveland media going to feel? And some of them are already turning. I see y'all. Some of them are already turning. How you going to feel if Shedeur Sanders becomes the franchise quarterback for the Cleveland Browns? How will you feel if Shedeur Sanders takes the Browns to the AFC Championship? How will you feel if Shedeur Sanders is the guy that leads the Browns in the future to the Super Bowl? How will you feel and what are you going to say if Shedeur Sanders leads the Browns to winning the championship? But you keep putting all these obstacles on his way and all these names. And then what I don't want to hear is that we keep pushing this narrative and Shedeur has tried to be or become a member of the community of Greater Cleveland or the Greater Cleveland community, and that he becomes a franchise quarterback. And when it's time to renew his contract, what I'm afraid he will say is, thanks, but no thanks. I'm taking my talents elsewhere. Because it has always been everybody But Shedeur.